Has it come up? Yeah, can people hear me? There's a bit of an issue with this YouTube live app. It keeps telling me orientation's wrong, and then it narrows the picture, and they keep changing this every time I do. Oh, thanks, Tadas. Thanks for telling me that. Because it keeps telling me on my phone my orientation is locked. Rotate the device back. Well, it looks absolutely fine in the picture. Sorry about that. Right, we're on. Sorry about that. YouTube keeps changing its settings every time I come to do a live stream every 2 months. It's like a completely different procedure. There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the quite a spontaneous live stream. Ah, I see. I've got you. Yeah, a very spontaneous live stream. My last live stream before I start my YouTube break in a few days. I have been busy with the focus today, videoing and having more success than failures, which is always a good thing. So I wanted to continue the theme of rather challenging failure and success, and a few other mixed metaphors there. And the live stream in question, this is not a live stream about Focuses, Rovers, Fiestas, you name it. It is a generic discussion that I really want to have with those of you who've bothered to turn up. Those of you who are watching this after, hopefully this would be quite interesting to listen to. And I'm wondering what sort of responses I'm going to get today. Old cars versus new cars, old versus new. It's been said before, and I'm sure I'm not going to make it a more generic live stream by saying which is better, because there's no such thing as which is better. The car you've got that's suitable for your needs is the best car you have, whether it's old or new. And old and new is very, as a meaning, it's very stretched. Are petrolheads stuck is the title, and it took me a while to work out what sort of title to give this live stream, because it's a tricky debate to have. But basically, this is the scenario I will give you. I have an aging fleet of cars. I have a 35-year-old classic Ford Fiesta, which is the classic and enjoyment car. So is my Focus, which I could be pressed into daily use, but I choose not to, because that's how high esteem I regard that car in my life, and it's cocooned and protected as much as possible, being 22 years of age. And the Rover 45 Beatrix, who is 20 years of age, and aging as well. And here's the problem: how long can I continue doing that? Is it sustainable? Are there any newer options for cars that are, one, well, easy enough to maintain? Probably not. We know that answer before, but still I would ask that. People will often ask me the cut-off date that I have in my head for what I would class as cars that I wouldn't touch necessarily or want to own, and cars that I would definitely be open to owning. And for me, the cut-off date is 2005. For some people say that peak car, that basically when the motor car could not improve anymore, and it has just gone downhill in quite a few departments since. Most people will say 2007 as a rough guesstimate there. And every car afterwards, they're either harder to maintain, not really likable, haven't really got a personality to them, like most cars. They're more like commercial washing machines, white goods, etc. And that's the way I view most of them. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't be open to owning one of them as a main driver, i.e. a car that I don't like as much. I don't mind driving it in all weathers, wherever that might take me, all year round. I'm not really going to care if I get the odd scratch or dent, because that's the life of a daily or a main car. but a car that's going to be reliable enough to not give me long-term issues, and a car that's not going to, well, provide me too much headache in terms of repairing those problems. Um, and a car that ultimately I like. And I've sat down with my friend Martin, and we've both, Martin, are you there, Martin? Um, Me and Martin have sat down for hours on end, and this is a conversation we've had so many times. So Martin's fleet is very obvious. We've obviously got the classic 1968 Mini Traveller and the Van den Pla Allegro, which you two classic cars. Then you've got your Rover 600, your Rover 45, and the youngest car in his fleet is a Rover 75, the 53 plate. Oh, I can't remember now off the top of my head. So Martin's been looking for a younger car that he could use to take the mileage off other cars, and a car that he can commute on the motorway between two different places regularly, and something that isn't going to cause him too many headaches. And I've had the same problem, because beyond Beatrix, I'm struggling. I don't know what's out there. And I've wrapped my brain to think what exactly is out there for petrol heads. And when I say petrol heads, diesel heads as well, you know, you get the phrase. So I just want to put this there, and whether anybody has got any suggestions, whether they feel stuck in the world of motoring, where we view cars differently as car enthusiasts. We look at them very emotionally, whereas other people just don't care. They're just, you know, a bit of metal on four wheels. But because we're car enthusiasts and we have that emotional connection, we tend to look at things a little bit more strictly. And that means that many cars are just an absolute no-go straight from the off, because they've got no personality, they're plain, they're boring, they don't drive well. What is it about them? What is it about them that makes them, you know, likable in any way? That's a tricky one that I found, and I hope that this is going to be a good discussion. I don't know how long this is going to go on for, but we'll go on for as long as it remains fruitful and constructive. So remember, this is not about, just a reminder to people, don't ask me about Mark 1 problems. This is a specific discussion about this. Okay. So comments, just first of all. So that's me to start. This is the situation that both me and Martin are in. And I'm sure many of you are in this situation where you've got a bunch of aging cars. Your youngest car is, let's say, even like, you know, 15 years old. And you're thinking, well, what does the future hold? This isn't sustainable. And I know that this is not sustainable. Running a fleet of old cars it's not fun. It's not fun. It's like you're firefighting all the time. You know, you put one fire out and then another's gone off. And that's not good. I would love a main daily car that's 10 years old. Obviously, it depends on your budget. 10 years old that I could maintain in the same way that I've maintained all my other cars. There'll be tricky bits, there'll be easier jobs, but it won't cause that many problems. And when the problems come around, it's very DIY friendly. I don't see that. I don't see that 10-year-old car. You name me a car from 2014 that is in that category. Anyway, I'm going to go to the comments because they're all flooding in now. Tadas, how's the Rover after the damaged roof? Nothing's been done to that car at the moment. It's just sitting still at the moment. Obviously the plan is to do the roof, but I can't really say more about that. You know, she's ticking over quite nicely, and that's all I can ask of the car. So there isn't really an update there, to be honest. Sorry about that. Hello, my friend. Hello. Tanas, to the topic. Basically, I now have a Mark 1 and a Mark 3.5 Focus. Newer one is nowhere near as fun and a joy to drive. Yes, it is more modern. It does feel a bit soft. You can't feel what you're doing. That's interesting, because I often find that they're too firm rather than too soft. So that's an interesting one. And obviously I know you've just bought that Mark 3.5 Focus, and I passed my test in a Mark 3 Focus. Now, you would think immediately, I'm sure some people would be thinking that, well, that's that's in this category that you're talking about, Andrew. I mean, the oldest are 13 years old now. I was lucky that I learned to drive in one of the newest. And believe you me, my eyes shot out through my head when I learnt my instructor had upgraded from a Mark 7 Fiesta to a Mark 3 Focus, a brand new off the block, really good looking car when they came out. But my problem with that is the ownership as well. And this is something that might come up as well, is the ownership of such cars. I don't like the generic owner of a Focus, because most people, and I'm sorry, this goes for Fiesta Mark 7s, they're not looked after. They are literally run into the ground. So whatever car I buy, it's usually a crap car. And I've got a reputation for buying cars on their knees now, rather than ones that are actually good. Most Mark 3 and Mark 3.5 Focuses are in a good age, because the youngest would be about 8 years old or 9 years old. So it's a good place to be in that sense, or 10, maybe about 10 years old. So that's an ideal car, and it's one of the ones at the top of the tree. But what puts me off is that the owners don't look after them. And I'm on a lot of Ford Focus owners groups on Facebook. And when I hear of people saying, how do I change a spark plug? This really, really isn't a good start. Number one, people are asking, how do I open the bonnet? I mean, they're asking, so they want to do it. That's how you learn. Bit concerning. That's a bit concerning as a prospective owner. And it's a snapshot. And it's a snapshot I have for most cars now. They're not looked after. Cost of living is biting. People haven't got enough money, or people are damn lazy. That's my other suggestion. And that really puts me off. Really does. Because I don't stick up for myself in this respect, but I do make people look stupid. Not that I intentionally do so, but I look at other people and what they're doing, and I don't like it, particularly with their own cars, or the level up, the lack of maintenance, basically, the lack of maintenance. It's like that. But it's nowhere near as good to drive. You see, I don't mind that, Tadas. I don't mind the compromise of having a car that drives. We know that modern cars probably don't have as much feeling or soul or personality. We know this. So that's not something that I wouldn't necessarily be bothered about, because I know it's a compromise, and I'm happy to compromise a few of them things. If it gets me from A to B and it's reasonably comfortable, and there's bits to it that I can live with and get used to, that's fine. It's sheer repair costs and the lack of DIY friendliness that adds to the bill a little bit. The stack of cons against pretty much most cars for me beyond 2005. I know there's a load of cars between 2005 and 2011, let's say. That age I would look at, but I see tired cars. Mark II Focuses, rotten. Mark IIIs, getting a bit scabby underneath, the early ones. Mark 7 Fiestas, they're just battered. They're just battered. And I'm just going to end up rebuilding the car like I've had to do to a number of cars, including Beatrix. So what's the point? I might as well own a car that's a bit older that I'm going to really like, because I don't consider many cars after 2005 likable to me. And that's very subjective, but it's something to go on with. Dave, hello, my buddy. Dave and D, hello, my friend. The 3.5 does drive nice on the road, more quiet for the long journeys. Why not take a new one? And I did take my 3.5 to take some kilometers on my Mark 1 to use both. That's the idea. Your main car takes the strain, basically, and you need a car, because at the end of the day, most of us commute quite a long way to work. I'm lucky. I don't have that necessary demand for mileage, but 95% of working class people need the miles, and you can't put that on older cars without consequences. You just can't demand that much. So in a way, My mileage, my lack of mileage allows me to actually own older cars, three old cars, which I've got, because I don't do that many mileage. Even on Beatrix, it's 3,500 miles a year in Beatrix. That's not a lot of stress. Craig Shopping, hello my friend, how are you? Good evening people, how are we all doing? Anything newer than 2006 is a no-go for me. And by the way, guys, Craig is a professional mechanic, so this is a good point. Anything new on a 2006 is a no-go for me, and I work on the new stuff 7 days a week. So there you go. Ask your mechanics as well. In fact, that's a very good bet actually if you're having the same problem as me. I know the answer already, but you need to ask professionals like Craig who do this all the time. Craig, how enjoyable is it working on newer cars from 0, hate it, 10, love it? Give a rating, because I'm pretty sure it'd be quite low, but what's your opinion on that? But yeah, ask the professionals, because they'll tell you what's a pain to work on. And if the professionals find it a pain to work on, you're either going to find it impossible yourself to do the job, a repair, or you're going to be paying a lot of money whenever this car needs to go in for repair. And by the way, guys, this episode is all based on owning a car outright. I will never lease a car. I'd rather walk, because leasing a car is fake. I'm sorry. It's not yours. You're renting a car and you're paying through the nose for it. You can't save for an actual car that you want to own. You're locked in finance. So this is all the basis of a car to buy outright, by the way, because otherwise there is nothing stopping me from going out. Well, I'd have to ditch a car first, and getting a new lease deal for a brand new, maybe even a under 3-year-old Fiesta or Focus, or brand new Focus Mark 4. I could lease one for like 400 quid, something like that a month. Not going to though. It's a total waste of money. That's the easy way out. That's what everybody else does who isn't a car enthusiast. I don't say that because there are car enthusiasts who lease, but it's a total waste of money. So that's me actually owning a car. And same for Martin. I mean, Martin will buy a car outright. So, I don't see why you would stop doing what you've been doing for many years, because it's all you ever know. I want to be the owner as well as the keeper on the logbook. Darren, yes, you have 3 classic cars, mate. My advice is to drive them, enjoy them, and don't cocoon them. As you know, I've a 2003 Leon, 21 years old, and a Focus, 1999, 25 years old, and I use them and enjoy them. Darren, I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. They are to be enjoyed, but we have to be very careful how much we enjoy them, because of how people drive in this world, and driving them in bad weather. If you are going to drive an older car in the winter with the salt and the rain, you have to be prepared to get on your hands and knees and do a bit of welding later down the line. That's the way I see that. So you have to use them wisely and economically. What I mean is, if you use a classic too much, and I've done this before with my old P6, there was a time where I actually used the car more than the Focus, and I actually stopped feeling like it was a special car. I mean, credit to how well it was a 40-year-old car that I was using very regularly, and it was capable. Says a lot about P6s. But should I have been? No, because it wore off. I stopped enjoying the car as much because you're just using it every day. It didn't feel special. Save it for the weekend. Save it for a nice day where it's not wet or raining, bit of sun. Well, at least it's not wet. As long as it's not raining, I'll drive my cars. And then I enjoy them, driving them more. I have no enjoyment. In fact, I feel a very sense of massive nervousness whenever I would drive the Fiesta or the Focus in the wet. But it's doable to do what I do, but it's hard. And on the subject of this live stream, staying on topic, you can do it. You can own older cars, but you're constantly firefighting. And if you put more mileage on, you're even more firefighting. it's the rule of fun. Martin, hello, my friend. I'm glad you could join because this is what we've been discussing a lot. I suppose it depends what we mean by old and how we drive, how we define. When does new start? Is what I'm. No, it's a good definition. To me, the definition of old and new is very subjective. It depends on what you think. Personally, I think anything with the new tag should be within the last 10 years. Bangonomics is very much over 10 years old. I tend to think of new cars between 0 and 10. And 10 to 20, Bangonomics. So technically, Beatrix is like on the edge. All my cars are out of that. And then 20 plus, you're talking a little bit more interesting, potential modern classic. That's my perception on that one. So older cars, basically. Some people would say that an over 10-year-old car is older, but it depends on your perspective. Enchantress, I would nominate a Ford Fiesta Mark 7. Good shout. It is a good shout. I'm just concerned over the way they're looked after. I don't think they're looked after at all. The best examples I've seen owned by my friend Alex, and he loves them. And he got one of the nicest ones I've ever seen, to be honest. I think that car's going to be standing on a field on its own, to be honest, in the future, because nobody really looks after them, and that's the point. What's the point in moving on if people don't look after them? It is one of those choices, though, I have to say, that's right there. And there are there are good versions. You know, they're not all badly maintained. There's always one good owner. Problem is with Ford Fiesta Mark 7s, and this is a personal thing, I couldn't afford one. Why? Everybody knows about Ford Fiesta Mark 7s. Ford Fiesta Mark 7s have shot up through the roof. Even shocking examples are really expensive, where it costs about at least $2,000 for one with problems. Why would I spend $2,000 when I can spend less money on a Rover 45 or Rover 75, which would be far more nicer for me to drive? Actually, very, very. I'm not saying that Mark 7 Fiestas are difficult to work on. I think this is a good point, actually. That they have a massive pro, and that is they are easy to work on if you've got the Sigma engine in it. From my perspective, but it just lacks character that I see in older cars. It's not quite the car for me. It's a great car. It's an amazing car. Probably one of the best generations of Fiesta. I'd say, being biased, the Mark III was a game changer in many ways. The Mark 7 also, hence why it was in production so long. So it is a good point. It's a valid point, that one. Darren, why waste your life driving something generic just to keep your classics safe? Drive them. That's what they're there for. You need to do that, though. Sometimes you do. I mean, at the moment, I'm not doing that. I'm not, the Beatrix is not generic. That's the point. So I'm actually driving through bona fide classics in their own sense. I do get that impression. Because I struggle to buy cars. I would struggle to buy a car and then spend money on it, repairing it and improving it when I don't like it, or when I'm not as keen on it. I think that's a good phrase. And there's a lot of cars that I don't dislike. I'm just not very keen on them. Or there's other issues. So, for instance, I was looking, and me and Martin have discussed this, the very last version of the Saab 9.5, I love them. Based on the insignia, so a lot of GM underpinnings. But because Saab messed about with it so much, a lot of parts are unique. So again, what's the point in owning a 2010 Saab 9.5? Also, the diesel thing, clean air zones, that's a problem, that's a serious problem for diesels. But why would I own that when Rover 45, Rovers have part supply issues, there's only a few part suppliers. So I'll be going from the Rover to a Saab, but having the same issue, maybe even worse. They are good looking cars though. The way the backlights curve round, aesthetically, one of the cars that I would really rate aesthetically after 2007. There's very few like that, believe you me. From my, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We've all got different tastes there. Tadas, my 3.5 Focus is 2017, so 7 years old, and it is good condition, just a bit of rust on the bottom. Excuse me, 1.5 diesel. You are right, interior isn't looking that like somebody looked after it, but well, interiors are interiors. They can be battered, and as long as the switches work, I don't really mind that. I think the point that I want to make is functionality is really important above everything else, because this is the thing. When cars get old, when cars go into the classic era, when you lose a bit of functionality, like for instance, let's say the heated windscreen packed up on my Focus, I don't care that it doesn't. I'm not going to take the windscreen out. There's no cracks in the windscreen. I'm going to leave it and just say screen's broken, the heated element's broken. Do I need to use it? No, because it only goes out it goes out pretty much from March to September, if I can help it. If I need to drag it out for a bit of emergency driving, then I'll do so. But I don't need it. So it's not going to be in cold climates, therefore I'm not going to need the screen. So it doesn't matter that functional toys and items on your car stop working. But with a main car, if that happened, I have to get the screen out. It would be one of them things that would really bug me, because if you're having to de-ice your screen and yet you've got the facility there, but it doesn't work because something's blown in it, whether it's the screen or switches, that's not good. That isn't. So that's what would annoy me about cars that are 7 years old, that age, but have things that don't work. As long as it has things that work, that doesn't matter. Especially stuff that could fail the MOT. 10-year-old Dacia Sandero. Okay, that's a good suggestion. That's a very good suggestion. So I think I mentioned to you, Martin, about Dacia Sanderos, but the current generation, because I think the current generation look really good. I think they've got the styling right on the outside, whereas 10 years ago, I mean, they'd be all right to maintain, great to maintain. Basic, cheap, simple. You get in, and it's like being in a funeral morgue. It's so depressing. There's hardly anything there, and what is there is awfully cheap. But it's a cheap car. What do you expect? And it is a bit of a throwback to basic cars. I mean, I've always argued that car manufacturers, they've missed a trick. They've missed a whole market of people that don't want all the toys. They want less. They don't want more toys. They want less. And in fact, they want a car where there's just literally a radio and a heater with 1, 2, 3, 4 settings, and that's it. That's all I want in the center console. I could do away with, I mean, heated screens. Heated front screen is a luxury. Heated rear screen, no, you need that. Apart from that, what do you need? You don't need all these fog lamps. You don't even need fog lamps. You just get rid of the switches, get rid of the buttons, get rid of the toys, and have a cheaper car that people want. But nobody's done it. The Dacia Sandero in the last generation has become more attractive, and I've looked at it, and believe you me, I studied whether it be feasible for me to own one maybe in a few years. That may happen, strangely. I think that is one of the cars I'm going to keep an eye on. They're too young at the moment. They're too expensive because they're too young. I want them to get a few years older, probably 6, 7 years of age. So we're talking in a few years. I will look for how much they're going for, and I'll see if are these cars going to fall apart, because we know that a 7-year-old Rover 45 or Ford Focus Mark 1 is like a spring chicken. Not with a cheaply made Dacia Sandero. That's my worry about that. They're going to age quickly, and by the time they get to, maybe, let's say you bought one at 6 years old. Let's say I buy one at 6 years old, and I get 4 years out of it, and by 10 years old, it's absolutely dead in the water. I would think that's a total waste. but it's a reality, unfortunately. Oh, sorry, Martin, I think I skipped you. What sort of equipment would you expect on a new car? Is perhaps something to help define how does that equipment affect the ownership experience? Does it make it better or worse? Like I've said, less equipment, Martin, not more equipment. That it's not what sort of equipment, it's less equipment. That is me shouting my basic car antics there. Excuse me. I would expect everything on that. What I would like on a new car is everything my Focus Mark One has in the interior, or maybe Rover 45s actually. No more than that in terms of button switches functionality. I don't want too many toys because, as mechanics will often say, Craig, new toy, more problems further down the line when they get old. That's a problem. Not when they're younger. I mean, the problem is now, and this is another point I'm going to bring up. Cars after, I would say 2014, I'm going to put that as a cut-off date. Cars after that date, they seem to age extremely quickly. The components are like made down to the cheapest finished metal or plastic you can ever imagine. The copper in the wires is thin and they break. And I just think that this isn't me muck spreading. This is a real thing. This is what happens on modern cars. You've got the engines with chains. Oh my goodness, fantastic. I mean, timing chains are brilliant, aren't they? Back in the day, 30 years ago, timing chains were more preferred over timing belts because we don't like changing timing belts. But now we've gone to a situation where we've gone from belts to chains again, but the chains are made of cheese. So they age so quickly. That's another off-putting factor. So no, less equipment is better. More equipment is worse. And to be avoided. Too much sky. Hello, my friend. Good evening. Good evening, my friend. How are you? Darren? Evening, my friend. How are you? As always, busy tinkering on that R8. Yes. Martin, to Craig's point, what is after 2006 that I should not want in terms of mechanical and electrical equipment, or is it just a quality issue? Craig, could you answer that one, please? That's a good question. Why 2006? I mean, I've given my dates. 2014 onwards for me is awful. But Craig, 2000, you said 2006. So what makes that the cut-off date for you? What is particularly wrong with that? So I'll come back to that. It's a good question, Martin. Jason, hello, matey. How are you? I hope you're doing good. I wouldn't even buy a car on finance. If I could afford to buy it outright, I would just buy a cheap car. Yeah. So we all. Very much so. Very much so. Too much sky. I could possibly just about lease a new car, but it wouldn't be as enjoyable and you wouldn't feel part of a community. That's a really important point, actually. That is a really good point, my friend, because we're all part of I'm sort of part of the Mark III Fiesta community, although it's not one of them sort of communities. It's very disjointed. The Rover 45 community and the Focus Mark 1 community, of course. But there aren't really car communities. This is my point. Are there real car communities for cars beyond 2010? Because just 2010 as a ballpoint figure, because car enthusiasts like us are interested in younger cars. You know, this is just me because I'm a bit way older, right, in terms of this. But there are car enthusiasts that own Mark 3.5 Focuses, Mark 3 Focuses, Mark 4 Focuses even, let's say, just as an example. And they've got their own owners communities. They've got their forums. They've got the Ford Focus owners forums. They might have they will have some Facebook groups. But do they have anything else? Do they go to meets? Is there any form of community cohesion? No, not really. And owning a newer car like that, you just feel disjointed. My personal perspective is, with a main car, I'm not as bothered about the community, because that main car for me is doing a job. It's a tool. It's a purpose. So it's not a community for me. Is not important. It's down the pecking order, but it's something to consider. Um, I think, Martin, you looked at the Honda CRV sort of community on the forums, because you were looking at one of them, but you're hesitant at that. There isn't really much of a community, and generally the people in the community really do ask the most silly of questions, and you actually, that actually gives away the extent of how good, how well the owners look after a particular type of car. It wasn't good, was it? Let's be honest. I think it was pretty short on what you'd want. And Craig, I literally hate working on modern stuff. Even the basic servicing without a semi-decent diagnostic computer can be an absolute nightmare. Well, that's the thing, actually, because professionally, you are required. I mean, you've got your generic OBD2 scanners, but do you need specific equipment for specific makes of cars? So that makes it a bit more awkward to work on. So let's say I wanted, let's say, a German car under 10 years old. Would I need a specific software to, I don't know, unlock electronic calipers if I'm changing brake pads? I know that some OBD2 scanners can do that if you've downloaded or you've subscribed to that software, because you can sort of buy the scanner. I know with my scanner, you can buy the scanner and then you can add bits on to a subscription, like, you can do caliper unlocks and oil resets, and you can just keep adding them on. But do you need completely different scanners for different cars? So I'm just thinking, from a car enthusiast perspective who likes to do his own work, can it be done at home, or does it require this equipment? Again, off-putting factor. It's a good point. Tanas, also, for example, what choice for new drivers? SUVs? What is a new car to choose from in terms of small size? Again, what a lovely point to this discussion. There isn't, is there? Everything seems to be SUV. That's the trend. We've gone from family people carriers to SUVs. We've sort of jumped a little bit, but the hatchback and the super mini have been completely lost in translation. Now there is nothing to choose from, which is why I say I give a cut-off date from 2014, when SUVs started cramming into the market more and more, and there is far less choice for people who want a small car. I don't want a big car. Don't need a big car. What about estates? I mean, I've heard that Volvo are doing a bit of a U-turn. They said they were going to get rid of estates, and they decided, oh, that's not a good idea. What clever clogs decided that? Crazy. You could still get estates after 2014, so it's always an option. I always fancied a Jaguar XF Sport Brake, one of the most attractive estate cars I've ever seen, but it's a Jaguar XF. I'm going to expect serious problems now, because all them cars are at least 10 to 13 years older, I think, around that generation anyway. I'm sure that came out in 2011. I don't need a big SUV that has more weight, goes through tyres more easily, and doesn't have any more interior space. So that rules out pretty much 70% of cars on the loan of lack of practicality, and they're disgusting to look at. I can't ever put my money towards one of them, even if it was a main daily driver with good functionality, not much equipment. But if it looks like an SUV and it looks as bad as what some of them look, I'm not going to touch it. It has to tick all three. It has to be reasonably good to look at, and I compromise that. It doesn't have to be attractive. It doesn't have to set my heartstrings out. It just has to do a job, be functional, and has to be relatively okay to look at. it's probably not going to be one of them cars you're going to look back when you've locked your car. I've got a really funny thing. You lock your car, you walk away, and then you look back again, and that's when you like your car. That's when you like your car. If you don't look back twice, you don't like your car. Well, not as much as you might maybe think. Um. Sorry, I've lost the. Oh, I've lost this now. I've lost it. Craig, Martin, steer clear of electronic handbrakes. I see quite a lot of issues. Wet belts, it's the worst design I've ever seen. These are good tips, actually, really, really good tips. Electronic handbrakes. Look, I know we make a big deal of it. Oh, I can't do the handbrake turn. Who does handbrake turns? I've never done a handbrake turn in my life. Probably will do at some point, Craig. You'll try and get me into bad habits. Knowing your aptitude for spirited driving, my friend, spirited driving. But I don't want an electronic handbrake because I enjoy the DIY aspect of a handbrake, whereas electronic sounds like a bugger to me. To even change pads, like I've said. So, great advice. Wet belts, we know about wet belts, so that rules out pretty much EcoBoosts and a lot of cars that use wet belts. Ford get really bad rep because of the EcoBoost for this, and there are many other manufacturers who are just as guilty. Too much Sky. I've got myself into a dilemma having two cars that are special and shouldn't be overused. I don't yet know what the solution is. Welcome to the club. That is a problem. And I think it's a problem that, Martin, you are also kind of in that same aspect as well, because you're not exactly wanting to pile on the pounds with the 75 as well. You don't really want to be doing that, especially that car. But when you've got two that you're very conscious about, well, the Focus and Fiesta for a start. Now with a Rover, not got a qualm about that, so I'm okay about that. But again, I'd be screwed. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I wouldn't know what to suggest to that one. The problem is, my friend, I think you might have to, if you've got no room for a third car in your life, which most don't, I would think about which one you want to keep and which one you need to move. I would say enjoy both cars for now. Get your enjoyment up, tick the boxes, get another year or two off your belt, and be in a position where you think, right, I want to move one of these cars on. I've had my fun with both of them, but one of them has to go. And then you replace that car with the car that's going to be your main driver. I think I might have to do the same, because I can't sustainably. I can't have a museum of cars that, don't see a damp sponge or don't see a drop of moisture off the road. I can't. They're not museum pieces, but I've treated two of them like that, and they're all for the better of it, but I can't do it. It's not as if I don't want to use them either. I just habitually won't. Craig, 90s till 2000s was prime time for not only car design but reliability. I don't think anyone here is arguing, and I think that's why a lot of us are stuck in the 90s, early noughties. My era, for me, in terms of peak car for everything: personality, good looks, practicality, ease of maintenance, lack of problems, even at an old age. 1995 to 2005. Now that obviously the gateposts can be moved. It could be earlier than 95, obviously, and later than 2005. I mean, it could be like 92 to 2007. That's probably a good 15 years, actually. 92 to 2007, thinking about it. Nobody's going to argue about that, and we're caught in this trap. But the problem is, Craig, and this is the reason why I brought this up, it's 2025 very soon. Can't keep on running 30-year-old Rover 600s or 22-year-old your 20-year-old 45s or 25-year-old Focuses, and demanding reliable, I need to get in, start on the button, get me to the doctors, get me to the work, get me here, get me here, get me here, and expect little in the way of problems. That can't be right. We can't keep doing that because time is moving so quickly and it's leaving us for dead, because I want to know what is out there beyond 2005 for me that I can stick my nose to. Dacia Sandero is something that's come out of this discussion for me. It's just reminded me about that, but the latest generation. So I'm going to keep an eye on that and maybe do some research. But I cannot see any cars between 2005 and 2014, 2015 that are not running to the ground. I'm sure there are cars, but it's a question of a balance, like I've said before, functionality, appeasement, and all sorts. Sorry, I've spoken for too much now. This is going very well, guys. Really well. This is a really good discussion. It's something different. Nick, hello, my friend. Unless someone has pointed this out, but why is your camera picture the opposite side? I am so sorry about that, because I am looking at a studio image. I don't know what's gone on here, but it was forcing me to go portrait, and then I've done landscape. I am looking at the screen and I can see myself on my own computer, and it is completely the opposite way around. I don't know why. I have no idea. I've got a feeling though, when this live stream ends and you want to rewatch it, I think it will reverse the image. I don't know why that is, but sometimes it happens. It might be because my forward-facing camera is on as well. So yeah, it looks a bit weird, doesn't it? But still, you've got my good side. Tadas, what I also see of owning an old car is parts availability will go down and will be harder and harder to get. Who knows, next time I will need a chain, I will not find it. This is another good point. We're lucky with Focus Mark 1s because I don't think parts availability are going to be a serious issue for another 5 or so. I think the next 5 years we're fine. There's plenty of aftermarket manufacturers making really good stuff. There's some rubbish stuff, but there's really good stuff. But generically, for a lot of cars, I agree. Most cars between 95 and 2005, big problem. But isn't that going to be the same for cars that are currently, let's say, 10 years? Let's say your Mark 3.5. I'd say give it several years, and the parts for that are going to be drying up, because part supply is only because of demand. And I can't see an awful lot of them being around because of how quickly they age. Like I've said, like the wiring and lack of DIY friendliness and general lack of maintenance and wet belts and all that. Okay, but poor design that even when you look after it, it doesn't look after you. So there's going to be less of them left than, let's say, Focus Mark 1s now. I'm pretty sure that, let's say, when Mark 3.5s get to 15 years of age, there's going to be far less of them than there are Focuses that are over 20 years old now. So that's less cars, that's less demand, less parts. That's another issue. So I don't think part supply for newer cars over 2014 are going to be any better. Good point about the electronic handbrakes. Darren, old cars in general cheaper to repair. Example, my 45 headlight bulb, £2.50. My Passat headlight, £950. Oh my gosh, that's a fully built LED, isn't it? That is a big problem. That is a big problem, and it's things like that that people don't realise when they say, oh, I like my car's got to have new fancy LED headlights. It's all good when they're working, but when it goes pop, so does your wallet or your bank account. It's a ticking time bomb. So maybe that's another good point, Darren, that you've made. If you're going to own a car younger than 10 years old, let's say, in this case, don't buy ones with LED headlamps. Make sure that they've got old-fashioned halogen bulbs, filaments. And what that does is it will limit me and you to lower spec cars, because pretty much most cars, even the middle specification, will have LEDs, maybe as an option. So high-end stuff, no, you've got to buy either a base spec or a sort of lower to middle specification. So maybe we've limited that down. That's a really good point, actually. Darren, that is such a good point. Mark 1.5 bulb is a few euros. The Mark 3.5 has almost everywhere LEDs, including LEDs on the back clusters. I know about that. And to fix that, you need new light, and that is 300 plus. There you go. I mean, it's not even the headlights at the front. I think actually, my ex-partner, she had a 207, and yeah, it did. It was a 2010 plate car, and it had LED clusters at the back. Now, the early Peugeot 207s had bulbs in the back, but the later ones, before the 208 came out, they went to LEDs. Oh, you see, having headlights at the front LED, that's worse enough, but having them at the back. I mean, what about your siding? I mean, to be fair, your indicators are usually in the mirrors these days rather than on the wing. Martin, what features that we would not want to be without would mean that a car was... Sorry. What features that we would not want to be without would mean that a car was too old for day-to-day to use? How do we feel about air conditioning, for example? How do you mean? Sorry, I'm trying to reword that in my head, Martin. I think it's not worded right. Could you reword that? Sorry, I'm a bit dim about that one. Well, air conditioning for me has been quite standard on most cars since 20 odd years ago. It's run of the mill. It's a system that's been refined. We know the problems of air conditioning. Usually the condensers get a bit old. Some cars like BMWs and BMW Minis, they enjoy their pipes rusting from the inside. Says an air conditioning specialist that came to me to top up Beatrix's air conditioning. So that was an interesting conversation while he was gassing up Beatrix. What problems do you see? What cars have the most problems? But BMWs are the coolest in terms of the temperature they can go down to. Pros and cons. I would do without air conditioning personally, but because it's such a thing that we've got used to, I think it's stupid not to have it. So I would definitely have it, and I probably would expect it, because air conditioning these days, I don't give much attention when people say, oh, but if you turn your air conditioning on, your fuel economy will go down. I'll tell you something, your fuel economy goes down so little, it's not worth the saving of not pressing the button when you need it. When you need it and you're hot, you need it. I can't think of too many more though. Sorry. When I had, too much Skype. When I had Skodas, I was on the huge Skoda forum where you can own a Skoda of any age and all feel part of the Skoda community. That's a really good initiative. That is. I've never heard of that. It sounds like a generic forum, but it's all inclusive, and that's nice to know. The French are still making smallish cars, but most are turning electric now. Hold on, let me just check. Sorry, just checking my phone's not going to die on me. Yes, I know that the French are still doing it, but well, I wouldn't overlook French cars. Not now. I think they have overcome their reputation for poor electrics to a point. All those generalisms and stereotypes don't exist. Peugeot 30, Peugeot 408 I think they're 408s. I can't remember now actually. He's one of the most attractive cars I've ever seen recently. Um, but he's not a small car. But Peugeot is still doing small cars, especially, and a few others are still doing that. But they're all kind of they're sharing platforms with other manufacturers, so you're kind of buying into one. Um, Martin, when I was researching Honda CRVs, it seemed that most owners felt that quality and reliability was somewhat worse with later versions. Happiest owners seem to be late 90s, early noughties. Yeah, it kind of doesn't really help, does it? It kind of just confirms our worst fears that there isn't nothing better than what we've got. And this is the whole point of, especially the 600. Have you got anything better than that in terms of how its reliability, functionability, and its general condition? Same with the 45. Is there anything that's better? That's why we're stuck, because it's a trap. It's a trap now we're in. Um, and unfortunately, as time is passing very quickly, the trap is becoming more and more evident. I know we would hear stories of people who will say, "Oh, I tell you what, when I retire, when I turn 65, I'm just going to buy a couple of classic cars, let's say 3 classic cars, and I'm going to bank that because of my low mileage, there'll always be a car that will be working." And you know those sorts of people. I don't think that's practical. I've never thought that was. I thought it was either a stupid thing to do, and impractical. I've known people with 8 cars on their driveway and only one functioned, and barely. It doesn't matter how many cars. There's only one of you. Can't stretch the resources, and there's only one you and one bank account to finance this, one income. Jason, an important factor now when looking at the second-hand cars is the cost of road tax. It's a killer. It's an absolute killer. On my 45, on the Focus, it's a killer. I don't think it's going to get better. Unfortunately, in 3 days' time, we're going to have a budget, and people are waiting to see what sort of costs are going to come, especially on the road tax kind of things. I can't see that changing. I can see it going above and beyond. But this is my point about well, with second-hand cars. What I was referring to our own cars, but second-hand cars. Let's say under 10 years old. That's a factor, because you would think that because they're so clean, the tax will be so low. But even on them, it's quite high. We're looking at £200 worth of tax in some cases these days, and even Ford Focus Mark Ones had you'd be paying that sort of tax a few years ago, and you think, well, what's the point? This is just like another con. I might as well own a Focus Mark One for this amount of tax I'm paying. We're supposed to be driving cleaner cars and encouraged to drive cleaner cars, but it appears not. Unfortunately, the EV agenda is playing out there, and they want you to get you into an EV, and well, even EV owners are going to be paying tax. So what's the point in that? Well, it's minimal tax, but that's not the point. Craig, I have an Android-based tablet which does 90% of the modern stuff with Launch and Delphi software, but it's still very expensive and it's subscription every year. I bet it is. So it does sound like an all-in-one solution, but the problem is I'm assuming you're just adding the subscriptions. Let's say you've got a car that comes in, like a brand new car, and it's got a feature on it that you need to unlock, and you think, oh, I haven't got that on my tablet. I need to download that and subscribe to that feature. Like, how to unlock something. That uh, basically solving a problem that should never have been created in the first place. So, and that adds the cost, doesn't it, Craig? That will add the cost to the business, and therefore the cost of ownership goes up whenever the car comes in for repair. There's no getting away from that. Tadas, that means I love both my cars because I will always look after them and I will go home after a drive. Precisely, exactly. Confession, I went to Lidl's today in my 2001 Rover 45. After I locked it and started to walk to the shop, I turned and looked back at it. I'm obviously easy pleased. That's a terrible confession. You shouldn't do that. We can't admit that we actually like our 45s, Martin. That's sacrilege, that is. That really is sacrilege. Can't be helped, can it? Nick, If I was to give advice in this era, and obviously Nick, you're in this boat too because you've got two Focus Mark ones. Do you feel stuck in this situation, buddy? If you were to go for a younger car, what would you go for? If I was to give advice in this area, the one type I wouldn't tell them to get is electric cars. Obviously not. That is not on the agenda in any form at all. That is a no-go zone, because I believe that things are now turning around full circle, and all the positives that were there with electric cars a few years ago have virtually finished. And now we're seeing the reality of that the boat has sailed as such. Craig, spirited driving. That's one way to put it. Let's say I've retired more my fair share of traffic police in my youth. Oh, you shouldn't admit that on here. It's terrible. Absolutely shocking. Disgraceful. Too much Sky. I think about selling the 205, but I'm not. To those people who don't know, David has a Peugeot 205 and a Ford Focus Mark 1 Saloon 2001. So we're talking about two old cars here, and that's why David wants to keep them low miles. I think about selling the 205, but I'm not ready yet. It has got so much personality, and my love for 205s goes back a long way. Yes, I know. So just keep for now, and that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to be holding out for now and see what happens, and that's all you can do, really. Darren, Martin, I always look back at my 45 too. We're not the only ones. Stick. Wouldn't it be logical to put driving and owning pleasure aside and just get something like a Corolla and use it to its dead only for the sake of saving money? Toyota Corollas, great point, and they just go on and on and on. They are totally and utterly devoid of any sort of attraction for me, but they do go on, and they are boringly reliable. It's not something that I would overlook, but I think they are so boring, I cannot bring myself to plough any money into one. And you might save money with one. You certainly would over many other cars, probably 99% of other cars. But it depends how they're looked after. Because my perspective on cars that are renowned for being, oh, that's bulletproof, that is, bro. That's bulletproof, that is. You don't need to repair them. That's a problem, that is. Because people tend to not neglect them because they don't think they have to maintain them. Because you get in, it starts, and it gets you to work, and you think there's no problem here. And what I see on the market are absolutely shot examples. I don't think they would take much to turn them around, to be honest. Far less than the 45 that I've done. But it's a massive off-putting factor. It's like Honda D series engines in Rover R8s. There was a time where people bought the D series over the K series because, oh, don't touch them K series engines, head gasket, all that shit. Honda D series, that's the one you've got to go for, mate, because they don't blow head gaskets. They're absolutely fine. They do. Honda D series, they do blow their head gaskets. My friend Dave's got one on his driveway with a blown the head gaskets going. They're not bulletproof. They're just as good as what people look after them. And this is my point. These days, people know the problems with a K series, and people will go and buy a K series now because it is better. When they work, they're the better of the two engines. They're more powerful and they're more economical. A Honda D series is more thirsty, but you do get it back with reliability. A lot of Honda engines at that age, especially the engines in your 600, Martin. But there's a point where how many owners have just got in, turned the key, and never done anything? No timing belt changes, no oil changes, no spark plug changes, not even the basics. And then you're left with problems, serious problems, even lack of water. Oh, indestructible, you can't blow head gaskets in that. No need to check the water levels. No even need to open the bonnet. And that's my problem with Corollas and a lot of cars. They don't have their bonnets opened enough. That's me making that quite clear. Dave, hello, buddy. I hope you're well. I hope your holiday is going well with family. I know you're very busy, my friend. I know you just enjoy for what you when or how long you're with us, my friend. Craig, my ex had a 68 plate Dacia Sandero, 0.9 litres, and the only thing about them is they rust fairly quickly. I've heard of that because there's the stone chipping comes off and they do go a little bit. To be honest, I've got to be honest, Craig. If that's the main problem, that's nothing. I could deal with rust. I could deal with rust any day of the week, but broken wiring, poor switches, timing chains made of cheese, general electrical problems. I think that's the theme with a lot of cars that age. If they exist down to a minimum level, I can deal with the rust any day of the week. I do it enough with my own cars. What's the difference? So, good point. Too much Sky. Some of the basic Skoda Fabias, even till recently, had old school engines and little equipment. Absolutely. I would actually say the same for a lot of Fiats with the old fire engine. Buy a Fiat with a fire engine, fantastic. There's a problem there. Everybody knows this. And Fiat 500s, they are so expensive with that engine because people know it's a popular car. It's got character, it's got personality, and people know. I never own a 500 because they're too feminine. But the point is, those cars that are well renowned for having good engines generally are very expensive. And there's a point where I won't pay through the nose. Other people might because they're desperate for a car. I'm not desperate enough that I couldn't turn an older car around and make it into a runner. I think people are actually genuinely scared these days that when they lose a car and they have to scrap a car, they have to get another car quick because they don't know if they're ever going to get a car again for that kind of price. And they panic and they overbuy because they don't do their own work and they have no idea what they're looking at. Bit of a factor there. God, there's a lot of Martin. LED light units might well be worth something to avoid. Great point. So we know what to avoid from this. This is really good. Too much Sky. I definitely prefer your right hand side. Oh, can't help that one. Craig, LED headlights. It's nice they can see 5 miles up the road, but they've just given me a free cataracts operation. That's really funny, that is. That's really good. Oh, dearie me. It's blindingly bad, isn't it? The worst bit is when you're coming up a hill and there's an SUV, tall, with LEDs, and they're coming over the brow of the hill, and for a split second, you don't know if you're literally going to hit them or not. You're just driving and praying that you don't hit them. You just can't see. It's horrible. LEDs for me should be banned because they're too bright and they're dangerous. That's another story. Tadas, but you see, I agree the parts will be less for 2014, but we're going to buy newer cars, so parts of those will be available, and for the old they will disappear. Parts eventually disappear. That comes with time. So I naturally think that will happen. I'm just making the point that I don't think there'll be as many parts for cars of 2014 onwards in about 10 years' time because there'll be less of them and there'll be less demand. But it will still be a better solution for what we're in at the moment, or what I'm in at the moment. DB Sparks, yeah, the rear lights on the Mondeo are LED and xenons on the headlights and daytime running. Oh no, we've forgot about daytime running lights as well. I hope they never go faulty. I hope they don't, mate. But you do know that one day, yeah, it's horrible. Running daytime lights as well. Maybe that's another thing to completely avoid. New cars are complicated. It's why even the reverse lights need to go to the computer and the computer to turn the light on in the back. That's a good one because it used to be gear stick, reverse switch, light straight away. It used to earth and then the light would come on through an earth. Now everything goes through the ECU or the body control module, that would be. And if the body control module is malfunctioning, you're not doing anything, there would be other problems. But that's like everything, to be honest. I see the delay of time after I switch to reverse. It is to discourage repair. Of course it is, absolutely. But my goodness me, a delay. Ooh, that's really... To Martin, I'm going at the speed of lightning here because of all these questions. Martin, to reword my earlier question, if a car doesn't have air conditioning, for example, does that make it too old? If aircon is not essential, then what is? I.e., what would we not want to be without? Right, that's a good way of wording it. It's aircon isn't essential, but if you haven't got aircon, it doesn't denote an old car. It just denotes a very basic one, because there are many cars after 2005 without aircon. They're just poverty spec. So maybe that's a thing to go for, but aircon isn't essential. I've lived without aircon for many years. The Rover 45 is the first car in 11 years of being on the road that I've had aircon, right? And I can tell you now, you don't need it. Even on the hottest days I've survived, I'm here. I haven't burned to a crisp. It's uncomfortable, but you get used to not having it. When you've got it, you get used to having it. And there's a lot of technology in cars where I feel we've got so used to having it that we can't do without it, apparently. Things like blind spot assists, or lane departure warnings. I don't want a computer telling me beep, beep, beep as soon as I've crossed the cat's eyes. I don't want to know. That can be done away with. All this driver assistance, gone. Don't want it. It's not essential. I could live without front fog lights. Obviously, the rear one is it has to be illegal after a certain age. But front, no, don't need them. Absolutely don't need them. I barely use them on my Focus. Actually, Tadas, you were witness to me using my fog lights on that drive to the motorist. That was one of the few times I've ever switched them on. And I was like, does it work? Well, all I will say is when I switched my fog lights on, you switched your front fog lights on. So I thought, he switched his on. So he's definitely seen me switch mine on and he's copying me. Good one. That was a great indicator, that. But I'll find out during the MOT, but there's not a lot of stuff that I consider essential. Heated front screen, don't need it. Cruise control, don't need it. Trip computer, don't need it. However, intermittent wiper settings, yes. You do need to control the wipers more than a fast and a slow and a fast, slow, or whatever it is, fast. It's either too slow or too fast, basically. You need an intermediate switch. Apart from that, don't need much. I wouldn't want to be without, well, in terms of underbody technology, ABS and traction control. ABS, yeah, okay. Traction control, yeah, we could do with that. But we are reliant on it, but we could do with that. It's a good safety aspect, and it can do some work when you're not expecting it to, so it's always worth having. And they use relatively the same system. Dave, nice to see the wooden plaque as the pride of place. Exactly. I made sure that it went exactly there, my friend, because it was a lovely gift, and it's a really, really nice piece, and I appreciate that. And that's why it's gone straight there. I'm glad you noticed that. Too much sky. As the transit delivery vans chassis cabs came with LED rear light units. You're joking? On a van? You see, this is crazy. Why would you need LEDs on a van? Don't need it. This discussion has become what sort of technology we could live with an app, because this will limit what we could possibly look for in the future. So anything with LEDs, try and avoid. Anything with electronic handbrakes, avoid. Limiting it down a little bit. They cost a fortune to replace if one part went. They have now changed them over as they break to the old bulb units. Great, but why do they go to LEDs for? I mean, Someone somewhere must have gone, look, how much is that costing? How much does that cost? And some clever class thought it was right to just go to LEDs. A van is a van. It's a working tool, not an artisan piece. Martin, I guess a lot of people tend to buy younger cars when their old car needs welding. Yes, absolutely. I don't, but this seems to be a very common motivator. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's usually that the MOT fails, structural repairs. Oh dear, we can't have that. It's the cost of bodywork, because what people don't like is the visual element of this. We need a plate this big putting into the floor. It's going to cost you about 200 quid. And people are like, how much for a bit of metal? Like, you know, you can just get like the glue stick out and glue the metal on, and it takes 5 minutes. That's very true. The other one is just general MOT failures, but that's lack of care. But luckily, because they won't exist, that those cars don't exist now. Good, because I don't want to own one of them. If it's got a list like that, and we've all known people buy cars with a list like that from the last MOT, and you think, ooh. Martin, Craig, free cataract operation, love it. I hate those bloody laser lights. They really are like lasers. There's no other way of describing them. I prefer Xenons. Xenons, they had something about them. There was really something about Xenons that, for me, get rid of LEDs, go to Xenons, because they're a step up, a massive step up from halogens, but they're not LEDs. They don't have the cost, and they look cool. Certainly do on Mark ones. Nick, that's a tricky comment about what younger car I would get. I would say a 2013 Corsa D 1.4. Excuse me, did you just say a Corsa D? I'm only joking. 1.4, small car, but I'm sure they're quite reliable. Everybody seems to have their own opinions on them. It's a General Motors product, so I wouldn't bank on them aging very nicely, but they're not bad. They're not horrendous, and if you don't care about the appearance and watch the timing chains on them, you're good. So, good shout, and that's a really interesting shout out there. I just wanted to ask you what you thought, because obviously you're in the same boat as me. But saying that, would you actually go for one? If one of your if you're Derek, which is your main focus, your diesel, if that broke, what would you replace that car with? Would you go out and go for a Corsa D? I suppose what car comes up at what time. But it's not a bad shout. Too much sky. I always look back at my cars and feel proud. I doubt most owners of new cars do that. Yes. Well, they don't look back. They don't even have to lock the car. They just walk away and it locks itself. So there's no element of, oh, the key's not working. Come on. There's no element of that. It just locks itself. You can have a funny sound as well. My friend with his Tesla Model 3 out there, he's actually, this is how ridiculous we've now become. He's actually programmed the locking of the car to come with a tune. You can choose any tune you want. And he's chosen the Microsoft Windows computer shutdown sound. So when the car locks, it sounds like your Microsoft computer's shutting down. Oh, you know, the one that goes do-do-do-do. I literally, as soon as I hear that sound, I think, oh no, it's all right. My laptop hasn't shut off. It's his car locking. Jason, I always park my cars far away from the entrance when going to the supermarket in the hope nobody will park next to me and potentially ding my door. We all do that, my friend. Those LEDs will fade with time, and with the old car, you will replace the bulb, and in the LED unit, we'll just have to replace the whole light unit. Yes, I imagine they would fade because, but light emitting diodes don't really lose the knack of brightness. I don't think LEDs go like that. They either work or they don't, because an LED is an electronic component. It's not a filament. It's just it works or it doesn't. It might flicker. If it may give you some signs that it's failing by flickering. At least the bulbs in your house do. My LED bulbs in your house will flicker, and then they'll fail. Um, Depends how it's being designed. Maybe some of them are programmed to actually go really dim as a warning. Replace me now. All of my cars I had aircon when it was broken in my Mark 1 passengers was thrown up from my passengers were thrown up from the heat. For me, it's mandatory. It depends what climate you're in. And yeah, I can understand that to a point. Craig, new cars are making new drivers worse as they rely heavily on modern tech. As I say, in reply to Martin's question, all the driver aids out that we could live with, the stuff that we've got so used to that some people can't go back. That's why I love old cars, because it keeps me driving well and it keeps my driving standards at a good level. If I started relying on a new car, that would be tricky to step into the old. I wonder how it would feel to drive. I actually know, to be fair, I have driven. Rob lent me his brand new Fiesta 2023, very well, the last ones to drive, and I drove that just to get my hand moving the car around. It was a lovely drive, a hybrid drivetrain, but it to go from that, I couldn't get used to it. It was so sensitive. You only had to stare at the gas pedal and it would just go like that. There's no feeling of moving off nicely. Even when you stamp on the gas in an old car, it doesn't go. Whereas it's so sensitive. They're so refined, but that makes them very sensitive. But to go from that to Ruby was like heaven and earth. Tadas, and here we are talking about LEDs in the outside of the car. Don't forget inside the dash, the backlight, the screens, the buttons, the cabin lights. They all have LEDs that fade or break without. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even late Mark 1s have got LEDs soldered into the cluster. Goodness me. I mean, that might be a repair that people are doing in years to come. Having to resolder some of them back on. Just resoldering a new LED back in. Yeah, it's been going on for a long time. The LEDification of cars. So replacing filaments with LEDs that absolutely consume very minimal out of electricity. Look, don't get me wrong, in terms of its consuming of electricity, it's good for the alternator, it's good for the battery, it takes a strain off the electrical system. It means thinner wires, less copper, less weight. These are all positives, apart from one thing, when they break. And that, for me, rules out any positive aspect in that design. But that's a very, very good shout. Unfortunately, that is something you cannot get away from, whatever modern car it is. Whether I look at Dacia Sanderos now, you can't get away from it. And that isn't even it's not even a 2010 onwards thing. It's 2000. It's early 2000s. Cars were starting to put LEDs on in certain places. Probably around 2004, 2005 would have been when a lot of manufacturers starting adding just little LEDs here and there. They've been doing it for a long time, long time. Mark 1s, they came out with LEDs from the get-go. Because, you know, like your heated windscreen buttons, you've got that little green light that indicates that it's on. That's an LED. They've been doing it for years, integrating LEDs. But they were probably very well made. And may, in many cases, last the life of the car. We shall soon see, time will tell. Craig, I don't know about that. I love a Transit, either a Smiley or Mark 6, Mark 7, Mark 8, and the customs where the problems became major. I look after a fleet of Mark 8 Lutons and flatbeds, and they are a nightmare. That's a tricky one. I love the smiley face ones. LEDs will fade with time and will not break before that. Okay. As I say, it's so presumably a designed-in feature where they do just dim a little bit. Um, Driss, Driss were mandatory from 2011. I don't know what that meant. Driss, does that mean fog lamps? Is it fog lamps? Mandatory from 2011 on newly type approved cars, but you can get a Focus up to 2018 without them. Oh, is that daytime? Oh yeah, daytime running lights. Sorry, I've seen your daytime running lights. Okay, uh, tricky one, very tricky. So you're you're basically forced to have this. So maybe Martin, we've limited it down to 2018, where we're forced to have certain things like that. It's a good point, and it moves forward in the right direction for both of us, I suppose. Good example is old laptops. HDD light will be super bright, and power and battery light will be much dimmer. Yes, that's a good point, actually. That is a good point. Nick, I would look out for a Corsa D, but I would choose one. If I would I choose one? I'm not sure. If I had to choose a younger car, probably be a Seat Ibiza or Ford Mondeo. Ford Mondeos are. Do you know what? Ford Mondeos are not a bad. They're a really good car, Mondeos. Just get one with the right engine, whether it be a diesel. It's a really good car. I would say no. It's a good shout, that is. Martin, thoughts on Mondeos? Just putting it there. Too much sky. There seem to be more and more accidents lately. Cars may be safer, but touchscreens, huge distraction. I agree. Obviously, it's all hands-free these days. To be fair, though, if you were touching the screen and you had an accident as a result of messing with the screen, if you were caught on camera messing with your screen, you would be done for, the same as, operating a mobile with your hand while driving. So touchscreens have to be treated as mobile phones, as far as the law is concerned. But I see it all the time that people are too busy messing with the settings and the volume control and the background lighting or the colour of the bloody the footwell lights, rather than what they're doing. That's just an example. Probably an exaggeration, but it probably isn't. Martin, a 2006 to 2008 Vauxhall Vectras. I'm no GM fan, but they do seem ridiculously cheap. I had a 2.2 petrol as a company car once. How bad do we think that would be? Craig, can I badge you about that? Do you know more about Vauxhall Vectras that age? I know Vauxhall Vectras. So you're talking about Vauxhall Vectra Cs, okay? The ones that look like a bit like my 45 at the back end with the two clusters, and then there's hardly anything on the big boot sort of notch at the back. Vectra Cs, good running gear, Ecotec engines. They're okay, Ecotec engines. I mean, I'd say they're really good petrol engines, to be fair. A bit plastically and a bit nasty to take apart, and access is a bit poor in some areas, but overall decent cars. They are a bit plain Jane boring in terms of the styling. I think very Americanized, almost like it almost feels like a Chrysler with some of the styling. The interior is typically Vauxhall of that age, but not hideous. They don't rust particularly badly. Very good shout. And I wouldn't say no to one in many respects. Another crap example about Euro 7 standard for pollution. In order to be Euro 7, the car cannot produce too much material from the brake pads. So they max out everything, what is possible from the exhaust. And now they think much more what we can make harder to create cars. Well, they're actually doing the same. I think Euro 8 is going one step further. It's basically there's a compliance on how much tyre pollution, because tyres when they wear, they're letting off bits of rubber everywhere into the atmosphere. So does that mean manufacturers are going to have to start making their cars lighter and stop this SUV rubbish. Are they going to do that? I don't know. It's pretty extreme, to be honest, and they have maxed out on everything. I mean, to be honest with you, cars between sort of 2000, around 2007, 2008, that was peak car for a good reason, because they've maxed out on all of what they could improve. You couldn't make a car more DIY friendly, normal, reliable, and decently attractive as well, to a point, and safe, with all your crumple zones and airbags and all these safeguards in place. And I consider every car after that to be overcomplicated and worse as a result. Just a difficult one. Craig, as Vauxhalls go, I've never had a good experience with an Ecotec. They aren't the strongest of engines, but they don't rust as bad as some cars do. That's a very good. Thanks for that, because, well, as I say, Ecotecs, I've never really had I've never had a massive issue with them. I find, Craig, do you think that basis of that they're not the strongest of engines is because of lack of maintenance? Do you think that if they were given regular oil changes and belt change, is it a belt or is it a chain? I can't remember in that. Do you think that lack of maintenance plays its part in why the engines maybe aren't as well visionised as what they should be? Just a I'll put that out there. Taras, what is the point of that? Let's say I have Euro 7 and I'll install cheap brake pads and they'll pollute us. Yeah, exactly. They'll pollute us just as much as your Mark 1. I agree. It's basically a tick box exercise for the manufacturer to tick the box and then get it sold. And as soon as it's sold, that's it. It can have whatever it wants on. It makes absolutely no point. It is people who enjoy making legislation for the fun of it, almost like it's a game. But the game is finishing, because there won't be a Euro. Well, there will be a Euro. I think there will be a Euro 8. They keep putting it off, but because of EVs, apparently, they keep putting it off. I don't think we'll have a Euro 9 because, well, you can't go any further with internal combustion. You can't go any further. I mean, it is the only solution. EV, at the moment, there's no other solution. EVs aren't a solution. That's a story for another day. They say Euro 7 will be the end. I thought that Euro 8 was coming into it. Maybe not. Maybe too many manufacturers have moved away and they don't want to do it. Interesting. This is really good, guys. It's given me some thoughts as well. And Martin, I would definitely hold the Vectra C sort of thoughts, because it is a sort of 5-year gap less than your 75. And it is, after 2005, that cut-off date that we kind of stuck by. It doesn't get you very far. I would like to be able to say there was a car 5 years younger than that, around 2014, ideally, that would appeal to both me and yourself, but probably not. Mondeos, maybe. I think that's one of the few ones that I'll be attracted to. But again, they have their own sort of issues. It would have to be a Mark 4 Mondeo. Mark 5 Mondeos to me are a no-no. They started going a bit over the top with that car, like every other car. Craig, get yourself a Cavalier SRI with a C20XE red top and you'll love it forever. I've no doubt about it. Lovely cars. Just old. Way too old. Should we be talking about buying older cars rather than buying new cars? I think that's the biggest question of this whole live stream. Are some of the newer stuff, the suggestions and the limitations we have to work by, is that any better than the older stuff? Is it just a case of, do you know what, forget this post-2005 thing, concentrate on just buying some examples from, between 95 and 2005 and just stick with them? Well, that's good for now. That'll be good for tomorrow and next week and next month and maybe in 12 months' time. Not in a few years' time. Not in 5 years' time. where's it going? And I'm not being funny. If everybody starts just saying, you know, I don't want a car past a certain date, well, there'll be no cars. The price of these cars will go through the roof because everybody will cotton on that this is the best way forward. It is going to happen though, not in an extreme way with sort of pre 2005 cars for me, but even generic, non-car enthusiasts, the general public. I think they're starting to do it because of the EV thing and the avoidance of EVs. I think people are very much in the mindset of, I don't want to jump on the EV bandwagon, so I'm going to keep my old car going. And if this packs up, I'll just buy a car maybe slightly older or slightly younger. So let's say there's a family with a 2018 Skoda Fabia or something like that, and something really goes wrong with the timing chain in that, let's say, and it's too uneconomical to repair. Too many problems. Okay, even at 6 years old. That family have now got to make the decision to either get a newer car or to go older or the same age. It depends what your budget is, but this family, for just hypothetical reasons, they're not going EV, they're very EV, anti-EV. They're concerned about it's not a short-term thing, it doesn't suit their needs. So they have to buy a car that's either the same age or younger. Okay, let's say they do that. If everybody starts doing that, nobody's going to move forwards. So effectively, most car enthusiasts will be stuck with pre-2010 cars. The general public will be stuck with cars between 2010 and 2020. Eventually, the general public, who have no idea about how to look after their own cars, quite frankly, who have to pay a garage to do anything, they will eventually have to jump on some sort of bandwagon. And I'm very pleased that I have the skills to not be in that position. Just as a hypothetical one. Tadas, if you don't want the wet belt and eco boom, try a Focus Mark 3.5 diesel. It is Euro 6, so kind of okay to maintain. Suspension is really similar as a Mark 1. Parts are kind of cheap. Yeah. I wouldn't say no, and it's a solution, and I'm very comfortable with a Focus Mark 3 or 3.5 because it isn't an alien being. It has many parts that I'm familiar with. It's just for those people who are not maybe as familiar, but it's a great option. Craig, even with well looked after Ecotechs, they have been known to stretch timing chains and head gaskets though. Oh my goodness, I've never known that. Martin, that's maybe something to bear in mind about the Ecotechs then. Maybe one that's a Vectra C petrol that's low mileage. That's new to me. Head gaskets, especially timing chains. Yes and no. I've heard of that. I've heard of some instances of that. I've heard of one where the actual timing chain guide collapsed because it's plastic. It collapsed, and you can imagine what happened next. I'd rather walk than own an EV. I'll be joining you on the walk. Very much so. Rubber Joe, hello, my friend. How's the Rover 45? Leading a very quiet life at the moment, my friend. In the backdrop, working hard and going about as she has always gone. All good there. Hope you're good as well. Lovely to see you. To just join. We are getting to the end of this, actually, to be honest. But goodness me, I'm losing my voice. Just discussing old cars versus new. Are we stuck with cars from the great generation of the 90s and sort of to mid-noughties? Is there anything else beyond 2005, 2007, name a date, that really petrolheads will want to own as a main car? You know, something younger to take the mileage off another car, which is a classic, because most of us have got more than one car. You know, a classic for the weekend and something younger, you know. Yeah, is there really any cars that fit the bill? We've just eliminated sort of functional stuff like what to avoid, you know, running daytime lights and LED lights and electronic handbrakes especially, and going through all the, but really, what do you need? So we've limited that down a little bit. There's nothing much. There's really nothing much. Tadas, soon EVs might be banned from car parks with roof because of fires. In the country, in my country, electric scooters are banned in public buildings. Yes, electric scooters are not really a thing here at the moment. They're not legal in many places. But with cars, yeah. Well, I would be fuming. I've got to be honest. If I took any of my cars to a multi-story car park and left it to go and have a meal or whatever, and came back to find the whole car park was um, basically bollarded off by fire engines. If I found out that was started by an EV, oh, that would just make it even worse. I wouldn't stop moaning about them. So I do understand that, and I don't think they'll last. There's too much. There's too many dangers with them. Um, I'm not going to overstate the dangers because I think some of it's badly reported in the press, and social media can also be that there can be some really gossip stories that are over exaggerated. Like EVs just self combusting. I mean, come on, they're not that unsafe. The manufacturers do have to go through processes to make sure that stuff like that doesn't happen. And if it does happen, there is clearly a fault that they just didn't see when it was made. A manufacturing fault, not a design fault, basically. Robert Joe, yes, I'm all well, friends. I managed to get all the welding done on my Civic. Jacking points all done. Oh, gosh. Did you say you were missing all the jacking points? I think you mentioned that. I have seen a lot of the work. Those, was it the sills? Yeah, Civics. Actually, Civics came up on our radar. Because Martin, you mentioned Mark 6 Civics, and we were looking at Honda Accords as well. After 2000. Decent cars, very decent cars. Craig, yep, Tadas, I just want to say, I have been keeping in tabs with what you've been doing. It's really good work, Rover Joe. Really, really good work. Craig, Tadas, I've heard that as well. I won't have one in my workshop either. Too much of an insurance risk. Of course, actually for businesses, I mean, forget multi-story car parks. What about garages? How do garages cope with this kind of insurance to insure, parking electric cars within the building overnight and locking it up? I'd have kittens as the owner. I'd be having it outside. I wouldn't even want it next to the building. I'd have it probably far away from the building in a parking compound. Tadas, fun fact: if I would buy for my car, I would probably shoot for an old Puma, small, cool looking, should have fun to drive. Yes, absolutely, spot on. I have 2 scooters, and if you take care of them, fire risk is minimal, but it can happen. I think with cars, I think with cars, but when it goes, it really goes bad. Oh yes, it does. It does. Rover Joe, the sills, mine's the same shape as the 445. My sills were absolutely horrendous. The interior will be back off very soon. I have to say, presumably you got the sills, it was all pre-made, presumably. I've seen that Discount MG Rover spares have made jacking point areas. They're really good pieces of metal. Martin is going to get some welded to his 45 for the jacking point areas at the front. It's a very well made piece of metal, so it's they are pretty clever. Oh, you remade yourselves yourself? Oh, that's something else. Well done, you. That is really, really good. That's a very big skill. Hats off. That's a lot of skill. I could do with a metal folder. I thought that recently. Yeah, my Civic is the 1.8 VTI with the... Oh, yes. Yeah. I know that one. Sorry, I missed a comment. Also, keep an eye on newer cars. They will all have stop-start systems, the shut-off engine. I don't care. I don't care about start-stop systems. That doesn't put me off. I think there was rumours years ago that the starter motors wear out quicker. Theoretically, they would wear out quicker because they're working more. But it's such a refined system that the designers did think about that a little bit. But that doesn't bother me. That doesn't bother me. It just means that you need a specific battery. You can't just chuck any old battery on. You can't chuck a lead acid battery on. The B-Series is a cracking engine. I don't know if I showed you the photos. You may have seen them. I probably haven't, to be honest with you, Rover Joe. Tanas, those systems will kill starters. As I say, I don't think they kill starters as much as what you think, but eventually it would take its toll eventually. Quicker than a normal starter system. I've used built amber stuff on the project. Can't go wrong. No, I use their built. Oh, I've forgotten what it is now. I use the clear stuff. I can't remember what it's called now. It's been ages since I used them. I need to get a can actually. I love the aerosol because you can use it inverted, and it's got a special valve, which means that even if you use it upside down inverted, it still comes out because the valve allows it to go from the top. I did install an LED battery. I've heard of these LED batteries, and I can't believe LED batteries have not become cheaper, because I'm honestly, one of the biggest technologies for me that has not made it onto the shelves because of the cost of them, especially with the cars we own and classic cars, LED batteries, tiny things, and pack out way more power than massive lumps basically that we use today. How are we still using lead acid batteries in 2024 is stupidity. Really is. That technology needs to speed up a lot. They can take it, but it needs to be a special type. It's from LED because they're very, very heavy. Yeah. You can send it to my email, Rover Joe, if you've got any photos. Definitely. Alex, hello, my friend. I'll be going for a newer car when I come to replace my Mark 7. I'll be after a Mark 4 Focus. That might be quite interesting in the future. I wonder how Mark 4 Focuses are going to age. They're too young at the moment to judge, Alex, to be honest, but I wonder how they're going to age. I really do. I don't think they're going to give too many issues suspension-wise. They seem a bit simpler, especially if it's not the sporty ST versions, then it's going to have torsion beam suspension, less to go wrong, a bit more simpler. That's all I will say. It's a pity they didn't keep the Sigma going, Lead acid. Oh, sorry, lead acid, not LED batteries. Sorry, I saw that wrong. The Mark 4 looks really sad from behind. I don't like the look of the Mark 4, but it's personal opinion. So do I. I think the Mark 4 looks like a BMW from behind, but it still has Focus DNA, and it's worth thinking about in that respect. So yeah, I'm going to probably bring this to an end because my voice is completely gone. We're about an hour and 48 minutes. We're about an hour and 48 in, and I can't keep going. I've got all the rear arms sorted. Oh gosh, that's something. Yes, train arm bushes. They're all right to sort out. Craig Shoveling, I am going the other way. I'm going to be looking for a Mark 2 Escort 2-door in the next year. So you're joking? You can't get them, Craig. Bloody hell. You can't find them for good luck, because you can't find them for love nor money. So be prepared for a project, but I'm pretty sure that you're happy with that. And you're going to, well, you're capable of turning it around. I know you are. Just finding one. No problem. Thanks, David. Thank you so much for joining. Maybe a good idea to find out if there is a demand for the logos. I'll try and find out if there is I'll try and find out, Tadas. I've been quite busy at the moment, so I haven't even got round to it. But there will be a demand, and quite frankly, I might need another one. Hint, hint. There might be something going on there. So I might need another logo for another key fob. So yeah, I'll try and find out in various ways, as I usually do. I've got to do a few things. But the idea of a YouTube break is so I can actually concentrate on a lot of Focus Mark 1 stuff. And then we'll have an idea and we could just buy a batch. And I'd reinvest you for whatever you paid, it'd be reinvested. So you get the money back and all the profits go into the club's bank account, basically. Anyway, please, Rover Joe, send me the photos and I'll have a look. I'll be very interested. But from everybody else, I hope that this has been constructive, Martin, because really this live stream was a curiosity, but it's brought out of a discussion that me and Martin have had continuously over the last year. Namely, what do we do with our 45s? Are we stuck? What do I do about my 600? Are we stuck? What about the 75? And I've looked at my own fleet and thought exactly the same. That lovely video when I had all three cars on the driveway is great, but unfortunately a symptom of, well, there's nothing else. What else is there? There's nothing at the moment, and there still isn't. But at least this has brought up several things to look out for and some ideas for myself. There's one particular idea, but I just need to keep an eye on that particular car and how cheap they get in the next couple of years. I think that's the same for a lot of us. We've all got our eye on a car that we could own from 2014 onwards, but they're not cheap enough yet, and they're not cheap enough to be attractive to us. That's the real issue. Anyway, I hope that's given some form of conclusion. It's definitely helped me, and I hope anybody that watches this will find this interesting. Anyway, Craig, I will give you a shout. That's absolutely need to speak. Yes, I'll speak to you about that. You can speak to me this week because I have a bit more time to speak to you. Anyway, potentially Tadas, but I'm not sure because of time. And the reason I'm taking a YouTube break is so I'm not doing any of this. I'm not doing filming. I'm having a complete break. A break is a complete break. And I'm really not going to barge from that whatsoever. I'm being very strict with myself. It's been a roller coaster over the last over 2.5 years I've been doing this. A video every 2 to 3 days. I can't do it no more. And I'm going to end up burning myself out. And I've got so many jobs to do on so many of my cars. So this is not going to be a time for anything else. I may do one around Christmas, and that's what I will say. But for now, yeah, goodbye for now. Yeah, okay. So I will see you all, guys, and yeah, there'll be one more video that comes out in 2 days, which will explain everything that I need to explain. So I'm not going to repeat myself. Thanks to everyone for joining. I really appreciate it, and it has been quite constructive and a lot better than what I actually thought it would be. Really, honestly. Thanks for sticking to the discussion, and I shall see you soon. Take care all.